Okay. My first, I spent a lot of time on Zoom. This is my first recording experience. So, all right. So the first agenda item is roll call. I'm not going to do a roll call because I'm just going to let Abby keep track of who's appearing by Zoom, and you know, if and when we get these meetings back in person, we'll probably go through each time and introduce ourselves and introduce new participants in the meetings, but trying to do that by asking people to shout it out on Zoom is I would say virtually impossible. So I'm going to trust that Abby can keep track of who's here. With the meeting notice that went out for today, Abby did circulate the minutes from the past meeting. I hope everybody's had a chance to review those. Can I get, when someone's ready, a motion to approve?
As writer, I'll move to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve from Mr. Ryder, from Billy.
And
Anybody else?
second, Brannick.
And a second from Liz. Anyone opposed to approval of the minutes as drafted? So the minutes from the March 4 hearing are approved by unanimous consent. We do have some action items that we need to take care of today, including nomination of a chair and community members to be part of the council, as well as future meeting schedule. But we also have some informative agenda items that I think we should start with, because particularly the Pathways program is something that I'm interested in hearing about, and I'm interested in other people hearing about. We do have an agenda item for Jail Lieutenant Kim Lavasser in terms of jail population. I don't see that we have Kim with us. Scrolling through the participants. Sheriff, do you have any information on jail population? What your trends are?
She's in the meeting with Scott Moreland, I believe.
Yeah, I do have that information, but Lieutenant Lavasser is with Scott Moreland and Corporal Terry Wilbur at Scott Moreland's office. So Kim, if you want to answer that, or otherwise I will.
Okay, so I see we've got Scott, and now he's unmuted. So go ahead, Kim.
Hi, this is Lieutenant Kim Lavasser from the jail. Right now we're averaging around 40 inmates a day. We have 28 on that. No Hubers are going out yet, but we'll be doing that soon. Any other questions?
Kim, we can barely hear you.
We're averaging about 42 inmates a day. And 28 both on the ankle monitor right now.
So I'm just going to restate that for folks. What I think Kim was saying, and it's really hard to hear, was averaging 42 inmates a day, 28 currently on the monitor. And what she said previously was that there currently are not letting folks out on Huber, meaning leaving and coming back to the jail, but they're hoping to do it in the future. But is it true, Kim, that effectively people who are trying to exercise Huber are still able to do so if they qualify for and are able to get on the monitor?
Yes, Judge, they are. We are putting everybody out on monitor as long as they can pass their UA. And they will have to be enrolled in programming. However, we're not letting them exercise Huber, but we do put them out on monitor, even if they can't afford it at the time.
Okay. Anybody have any, Kim, did you have anything else you wanted to say in terms of trends, or is that 42 number holding steady?
It's actually lower than it has been. We've been in the 45 to 47 range. So right now it's actually a little lower than it has been.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Kim, for Lieutenant Lavasser?
I do.
Who's
Lieutenant
speaking?
Lavasser, this is Ruth Cressel.
Oh, Ruth. Okay, thank you.
And I am wondering, when you said that you're letting people out on EMP, does that mean in victim crimes, you're also allowing individuals on EMP?
We're not allowing that unless we have notification from the victims that it is okay. If we do not have that notification, then no, they are not going on.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on jail population?
Kim, this is Elizabeth. I just had a question about what percentage of the inmates do you know that if they were done with their sentence tomorrow would be homeless? And how is that affecting their readmission to crime?
Currently, I don't have any numbers put together for that, but I can tell you that everyone who is going to be, whether they're sentenced or not, if they are getting out of jail, we are offering to contact North Lakes if they need to set up any counseling sessions, any doctor appointments. We are giving that information to people who are getting out of jail.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything else for the jail population agenda item? Moving on to Wellness and Recovery Court, Ann.
Hi, just to let people know, we have 16 people in Wellness and Recovery Court right now. We are we still continue to go through and try and find participants or candidates who are eligible. I'm going to say we had a graduation yesterday that was a pretty phenomenal graduation. I wish everyone could be there to witness one like we had yesterday. I guess the part that I really thought was neat was the arresting officer was there at the graduation, and I guess it was pretty wonderful to see the graduate make note of how much he had an impact on her life as well. So, and there were quite a few people in attendance celebrating that graduation yesterday. I guess we're in year 3 of our funding, coming to the end of that. We'll start year 4 on October 1st. I don't have much more to say than that at this time.
Anyone have any questions, comments with respect to Wellness and Recovery Court?
Elizabeth Franek again. People that are listening to this via Zoom, can you explain what the Wellness and Recovery Court is and how they become a participant? Thank you.
I am having a really hard time hearing Liz. I got that it was Liz.
She asked to explain what Wellness and Recovery Court is and how someone becomes a participant.
Okay, Wellness and Recovery Court is a specialty court that is designed to work with people who have substance abuse dependency, as well as criminal convictions. Worked with that, they have to have a high risk to reoffend. In order to get into the program, that's something that we work with defense attorneys, with defense attorneys and the DA's office to have it worked out in their plea agreement to come into the program. I guess I'm giving a shortened version. Judge, you could add to that.
Also can come in as alternatives to revocation from referrals by the Department of Corrections.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you.
may have missed it, Ann, but how many are currently in the program right now? How many are in?
16 right now. When COVID hit, we went from about 32 people. At our lowest number, we were down to 5 because, you know, of course, backups in the court system, people absconded for whatever reason. So we're getting our numbers back up there.
Okay, other questions or comments regarding Wellness and Recovery Court?
Maybe it would be helpful, Anne, kind of to follow up with Liz's question, what about when Wellness and Recovery Court is, whether or not it's public, if that's something people can watch?
Well,
that's it.
Wellness and Recovery Court is open court. So yes, people can watch that.
And you know, Abby brings up a really good point. We're not meeting in person right now for Wellness and Recovery Court. We're doing it entirely by Zoom, but it's an open court hearing, and I have a Zoom meeting ID that is for all of my hearings that I preside over. The Wellness and Recovery Court hearings are on the regular Zoom meeting ID that is used for all my hearings. And this is it's a good chance for folks, if you want to watch a Wellness and Recovery Court hearing and see what it's all about, you're free to Zoom in and watch. And I would encourage you to do so. And if you need that meeting ID, I'll give it to you now. But you can also get it from the clerk of courts. The Zoom meeting ID for court hearings is, well, I type it. I don't know if I can say it. 945-4284-1622.
And Judge, you want to tell the date and time of WRC court?
Sure. It happens every Wednesday, assuming that there isn't a jury trial or other reason why we can't hold court on Wednesday. And it starts at 1 and typically goes anywhere from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, depending on how many participants we have and how long the hearings take.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll go ahead and put all that information in the text, in the chat.
And I don't know, Ann, do we still have like the trifold pamphlet for WRC?
We are in the process of changing that around with the new information we have.
Okay, I was going to suggest that it go out to the council, but once we get it finalized, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on Wellness and Recovery Court?
This is Pat Kinney. And is there a limit to the number of people that you can work with at a time?
According to our grant, we have a cap at 30, but we have never turned anyone away. We've never had a waiting list for that. So we stretch it at 30. 30 is a lot of people to have in the program at a time. Ideal numbers are probably where we're sitting right now at 16. But 25 would probably be the most I'd go to, would like to go to.
Ideal from the perspective of the WRC team members, not necessarily ideal from the perspective of our granting agent, but.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then the people that you work with, are these people that have not been in jail yet? You're hoping to avoid them in jail, or do you also work with some from the jail?
The people that we're working with are frequent flyers, I would say, with the jail. So when we talk about high risk, we're talking about the high risk to recidivate. So we're working with people who have been in this, in the system for quite a while. We don't start working with them until they're released from jail and they get going with our program. We do go into the jail to do assessments to see if they qualify for our program. what we try to do, we try to really work with attorneys to get people into programming as soon after their arrest as we can. And with the bogging down of the court system through COVID, that can be a little bit more difficult right now.
So when you say when they're released, is released based upon having served their sentence, or some discretion at the sheriff's department, or in some cases whether they can make bail or not?
It's post-conviction, so bail doesn't have anything to do with it. The people who are coming into Wellness and Recovery Court have been, their cases have been fully adjudicated and they've been sentenced. And they're coming into Wellness and Recovery Court either as a component of the plea agreement, like as a condition of their probation, or if they've been sentenced back down the road and they're on probation and the department is looking at revoking them from probation, they may come into Wellness and Recovery Court through that vector as well. In terms of the jail question that you're asking, Pat, some of them aren't in jail. Aren't like the Wellness and Recovery Court is averting jail time for them. Some of them have spent time in jail as part of their sentence. Some of them have mandatory minimums that they have to serve, for example, on impaired driving cases. And what Wellness and Recovery Court is doing is diverting them from further confinement or punishment and into the Wellness and Recovery Court program.
So you've got this program. Are you collecting data, you and or the sheriff's department, on how this is working? And then if there are certain things that the county, for example, could do to help people so that they're less likely to reoffend? So Liz brought up, do they have housing, which is an important component of this, but there are other things too. Is there anything that you could potentially see the county looking into, especially if you have some data or evidence that we could do to support you to reduce the number of people that are in the system and thus the costs?
Well, data is an issue in our county. We don't collect enough of it. I don't know how much we even collect. In our program, we're required to collect data, and we have an evaluator that works with our program with our data, but our data is so small compared to what we would need to collect with the county. So that's an area that we really need to work on.
So next Tuesday.
I'm sorry, I guess I just want to follow up on what Ann said, and that's we have data for Wellness Recovery Court. What we don't have is general data. So what we can tell you is how, for example, how our Wellness and Recovery Court participants do in terms of recidivism rate. We can't tell you how it compares to the general criminal justice population. We don't have a mean. We don't have we've got nothing other than the WRC data.
So, Ann, next Tuesday at 9, the Finance Committee, which I'm on, is meeting, and we'll have the Sheriff's Department there as part of the discussion. If there is some data that they could contribute to collecting as, part of what would help to make more informed decisions, I would be interested in getting some background for you on what would be helpful there. If we're going to collect some data, that may mean that we're going to incur some cost to collect it, but part of the point of collecting that data would be to reduce the overall cost of the county, in terms of dealing with people who are in the system. So if you want to send me an email with any suggestions for data, that would be helpful, and any background related to costs or just estimates or things to consider ahead of Tuesday, that would be helpful.
Okay, and I think Judge, I think Judge, you're one that I should be talking with, and Abby, about getting that information, about additional information with what we really should be getting.
But I absolutely agree with the general proposition, and I've been saying, this is something I've been saying for years, is we don't have data. We don't know if the things that we're doing are actually working. We don't know, and it's a problem of, if you don't know what's broke, because you don't have the data to show you, you can't fix it. From my perspective, this data component is a critical component to a better functioning criminal justice system that results in better outcomes for people.
Thanks, Ann.
This is Laura Negro. I would think that if we're going to start collecting data, we should do it at the PPLE committee. I'm also on the Ashland City Council Task Force on Policing, and we're looking at what data would be the best to collect at this point. So I think it would be better to start there, because you can throw money at it, but if you don't know what you're throwing money at, it doesn't help. So I suggest we start there.
So I'm not, I'm reluctant to talk about forming subcommittees because I've seen them as part of this body before and seen most of them not actually achieve anything. But I think if we wanted to consider, and also I'm not going to be chair of this for very much longer, hopefully. And so I don't want to be the one who's throwing out ideas to create subcommittees. But the idea of a data collection subcommittee where, we've got folks who work within the system, we've got folks who work in local, or are members of local government, both at the county and city level, people who actually hold the data, whether it's law enforcement, the DA's office, the court system, all present. And the idea that through this body, we can all actually come to the table together and have a discussion about what we can do together to collect data is very appealing to me.
On that note, there is currently sorry if I'm echoing, an effort by MMC. It's like a community needs survey that's going on, I think, right now. You might see links to it like on Facebook and stuff like that. And I think that does also kind of measure some of these things. It's for MMC, but I just mentioning that as far as data collection, we can kind of contribute to that effort.
So I'm gonna, we don't actually, we're on the WRC report agenda item right now. We don't have the data collection item actually on the agenda, but it's something I'm just gonna say, we need to make sure that we get on the agenda for future CJCC meetings. And certainly folks are free to work on the issue between now and then. Okay, so I'm just gonna move on to the next leadership report, which is the diversion program, the Pathways program update. And I think that there's a PowerPoint that was passed around. Abby, are you doing this or is Chris doing this?
Yep, I've got it.
Okay.
Is that looking correct?
I can see it. Okay. So I'm Deputy Group 6 with Ashland County Sheriff's Department. I'm the Pathways Officer. First, I'm going to go over the PowerPoint. Many of us have spent a great part of end of last year and the first part of this year revising the program completely. Used to be called TAD Pro. Now our name is Ashland County Pathways. So I want to thank the team that helped put this all together. It was a lot of work. So our mission of the Ashland County Pathways is to collaborate and implement interventions for nonviolent offenders for whom substance abuse is a contributing factor in their criminal activity, in immediate and effective treatment and intervention with ongoing justice system oversight will hold offenders accountable, restore victims of crime, and keep our community safe. That's our basically our mission statement. We take in, as somebody asked earlier about first-time offenders, low-risk offenders. That is the ones that go into our program. They can be repeat offenders, but are still low risk, and we try to keep them out of jail, out of the system as much as possible. The team that put that together, we're, as you can see on the PowerPoint, this slide here is myself, Abby, Cjcc coordinator, district attorney's office with help from Miranda for the public defender's office, or from DOC, Heidi Brewer from the public defender's office, Shannon Nessla from MMC. I'm not sure if I'm missing anybody. These teams that we set up here are new. I don't believe we really had them in the other program. So it's a lot more help to the program, help oversight of our participants and getting the participants into the program. The eligibility, as you can see, is pretty much spelled out. We go through each person, make sure all these requirements are pretty much met. And once they're determined to be eligible, then through the DA's office, they do get an offer to settle in their court case, and it usually results in a DJ, which is the deferred entry into judgment. Completion of the program. Could it be expunge of the charges, dismissal of the charges, whatever the case may be in the agreement. Our expectations of the participants, pretty much self-explanatory for the most part. Honesty, taking responsible for their behavior, being done on time, no new arrest, obviously, and the rest of the things on the list. So we've came up with a case plan which involves two paths. Depending on their circumstances in their case and their assessments, we do a compass assessment, and where they fall would determine if they're on path 1 or path 2. They are basically the same, just times are different, mostly time in each phase, and the reporting and just, things like that are different. So a little more strict in the second phase compared to the first phase or first path. Each path has 4 phases in it, and they must meet certain requirements of sobriety and complying with all the treatment recommendations until they move on to the next phase. And once they complete the phases, then they graduate from the program. The path 1 is roughly 240 days to completion, depending on, if they pass each phase in order as it's listed. It's about 240 days, and path 2 comes to about 330 days. So both are less than a year in the program. Like I said, we try to limit their contact with the criminal justice system as much as possible. It's it's been proven that to keep them out of the criminal justice system is the beneficial way to go. So once completion, the DEJ can be, agreement is filled, and then the DA's office will file with the court to vacate or whatever the agreement was. Ruth may be able to answer more questions about a DEJ, how that works. Again, I'm the pathways officer. I have my list on the last page there. Abby Johnson, the criminal justice coordinator, and Ruth Fressel is the main contact in the DA's office. Any questions on that before I move on? No? Okay. So as of right now, we have 5 participants in the program. I'm expecting a 6th one here in the next week. I don't have really anything else on that. Covers our system or our program.
So I would just add, this is Ruth Kressel, that the difference between path 1 and path 2 is dependent upon their compass scores and the risk as notified or as set forth underneath the path 1 and path 2. So I'm getting a lot of feedback, and it's difficult for me to talk with that.
Yeah, Ruth, hold on just a second, Ruth. Is it, but if everybody who's not speaking, just make sure that your line is muted. And I don't know if there's, well, I see David's door is shut. I was gonna wonder if there was feedback like crossover between David and Ruth, but I don't think there is. So just make sure that if you're not speaking, you're muted. And if you're appearing by phone and you're able, make sure that you're not on speakerphone. Let's see if there's any improvement. Ruth, go ahead.
Okay, Abby, if you could screen back to path 1 screen. So as you can see under the path 1 designation, it has in parentheses MR/LN, comma, LR/MN. And what that stands for is when the compass assessment is made, a number of questions are asked of the candidate to determine what their risk and need level is in the criminal justice system. And path 1 are for candidates that end up being at a medium risk and low need, or a low risk and medium need. And then in path 2, Abby, if you could screen to or go to the screen on path 2. Thank you. It reflects that the candidates in this path are high risk, but they have low needs, or medium risk and medium needs. And so what that means is that they may need a longer period of time in the program to provide stability and consistency in their lives to hopefully maintain them after they're released from the program. So that's the real difference between the 2 paths. It's, as Chris indicated, it gives the same format. It's just path 2 is a longer period of time for the participant to make sure that they're hopefully very stable once they successfully complete the program. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
I have a question. Are the folks that are in the Pathways program, is there overlap with the recovery court? How do those 2 work together?
So
Go ahead.
recovery court is for high risk people. So even though path 2 has a high risk, low need, the WRC candidates are looking at high risk, high need. So they would not be eligible for this type of programming. And a lot of times that's based upon the number of prior convictions that they have. So normally we would not, I don't believe that there would be a candidate that would be able to be in both programs. Because the assessment would sort of decide what category they're in. And that's exactly, as Ann was saying, what a number of us do is we sit down and we look at the cases that have been filed. We take a look at the charges. We look at their criminal history. We look at whether they're a resident of Ashland County or Bayfield County. And we decide, are they candidates for Pathways programming or are they candidates for WRC? And then from that point, there may have to be further assessments determined whether they have a substance abuse issue or not. And then either the prosecutor and or the defense attorney at times may suggest that they are candidates for one or the other program.
Okay, so I guess first question, comment is, does that conclude the information piece regarding pathways? Chris, Abby, Ruth?
For my part, I was just wondering if Ruth could just briefly explain how a DEJ works with the system, maybe.
So as the judge explained previously with respect to WRC, it's post-conviction, so it's after they have been convicted. In this particular instance on the Pathways DEJ, what happens is the person ends up pleading guilty and the court will accept their guilty plea but not convict them. And then they go into the Pathways program under what's called a deferred entry of judgment agreement, whereby if they complete all of the components of their path and are successful in compliance, at the end of that time, the state would move to dismiss and or amend the charges depending upon what the agreement held. So they would never be convicted. And this is really significant, especially in felony cases where many of the people, if they are convicted of a felony and it's a drug offense, would not be eligible for public housing. So it's an incentive, hopefully, for people to get into treatment and complete it successfully. Although sometimes, obviously the candidates don't realize the harm that could happen until after the conviction is entered. And that's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
Okay.
Me also, please.
Okay. Questions for Ruth, Abby, Chris regarding questions, comments regarding pathways?
This is, Pat, if felons are not allowed to in public housing, what happens if they're in public housing and then become a convicted felon? What happens to them, and then if they have a family?
I don't know that answer.
I don't know, this is Ann. I don't know all of the information on housing and felons. I do know that I think I would say that it makes it a lot more challenging to have housing if you have felonies on your record. There are some other ways that they can enter in, and the type of felonies also plays a big part in whether or not they can get into housing. So I'm not the expert on housing and your felonies, but it doesn't automatically exclude you.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
my understanding. I wish Kathy Beeksma were here because she does a great job of explaining all of the ins and outs of it.
This is Elizabeth Franick. I'm on that board for housing. And, Kathy Beeksma explains that they work on people with a case-by-case basis. And if they are a convicted felon, it depends on what kind of felony and how long ago and what kind of programs they're in. So there is a case-by-case basis that they work on. There are some crimes that they do not allow, though. And yes, Kathy Beeksma would be the expert.
I don't know, Abby, if you have the ability to do this. I see the PowerPoint's down, but I wanted to take a look at the eligibility criteria and just offer a comment. What I thought I saw was that the eligibility criteria included that you couldn't have, well, maybe we can look at it here. No prior felony convictions, oops. No prior assaultive weapons or weapons convictions. And Chris, can you mute yourself? Thanks. And I just want to offer that I wasn't obviously part of the discussion on eligibility. If the no prior assaultive or weapons convictions language was put in there in an intent to comply with the requirements of the nonviolent offender language in the TAD statute, I don't think that it accurately reflects what the statute says. If that was a separate discussion and the decision was made that you didn't want to have anyone with an assaultive or weapons conviction in the program, regardless of the TAD language, somebody tell me that now and I'll stop talking. Okay, so this is how I read the statutory language. It says that a violent offender means a person who has been charged with or convicted of an offense in a pending case. And during the course of the offense, the person carried, possessed, or used a dangerous weapon. The person used force against another person, or a person died or suffered serious bodily harm. That language relates to the pending case. The language that relates to the prior cases is contained in the next statutory provision, which says the person has one or more prior convictions for a felony involving the use or attempted use of force against a person with the intent to cause death or serious bodily harm. So, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but my reading of the TAD statute has always been that the no violent offenders relates and no weapons relates only to the pending case, except for as covered by the second statutory paragraph that says this is what's prohibited based on prior cases. So again, I don't know what the intent of the drafters was here, but if it's to exclude violent offenders just to comply with the language of the statute, I'm not sure that the eligibility criteria actually reflects what the statute says.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we'll have to revisit that.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I do think that when we discussed this with the state representatives, Renee Luschig, she also discussed with us the fact that it doesn't eliminate prior felony convictions. I was just, while you were talking, Judge, I was trying to go back to our most recent Pathways Handbook to see if that had been updated. So we'll note those and discuss those and make changes if necessary.
Okay, and again, I don't know what the intent of the program was. I just wanted to point out that discrepancy with the statutory language. All right, other questions, comments with respect to Pathways? Hearing none, we've got some, we're going to move on to the next section of the agenda, which involves hopefully eliminating me from responsibilities as the chair of the CJCC. So we talked last time about the need to cover two bases. One is nominating a chair and a vice chair. And the second is selecting a community member to serve on the council. I don't know which order to take those in, because there's at least, we had a discussion last time about various community members that might fill the vacancy for a community member. I know that there's been discussion among some circles that Mark Preen, who is with us today, was interested in serving as the other community member and potentially as vice chair. I'll say this, Mark looks surprised when I said vice chair. But for those who don't know, Mark was previously the first assistant public defender for Ashland. I think most folks know this. Mark also previously served on the council because of his role as public defender, and was previously vice chair. So from my perspective, Mark's a good candidate and more than qualified to fill all of those positions. And assuming Mark's willing to accept, I'm going to take these out of order because I think we need to have the community member vacancy filled before we elect a chair. So I'm going to take them out of order, and I'm going to go ahead and nominate Mark, if he'll accept the nomination, to serve as the other community member participant on the CJCC.
I'll second that nomination. This is Elizabeth Safranek.
We need to get a ascension from Mark, who looks like he's trying to get himself unmuted.
There, yeah, I'll be glad to.
Okay. So we've got a motion and a second. I guess, I don't know, I'm not great at Robert's rules, but are there other folks who have nominees for the other community member? So I think that means it becomes Mark by default because I don't hear anyone else. Let's just do it this way. Is anyone opposed to Mark being the other community member along with Zach Weber to serve on the council as a voting member? So Mark, congratulations. You're back in the saddle.
Just when you thought you got rid of me, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I think that also gets us to the next agenda item, taking them kind of in reverse, is a nomination of the CJCC chair. And again, I know there have been some discussions sort of behind the scenes, and there, at least this is what I've been told, that Billy is willing to serve, or may be willing to serve as the chair, and Mark may be willing to serve as the vice chair. That doesn't mean that other folks can't be nominated. So Billy, is that true that you may be willing to serve as the chair if nominated and elected?
Yes, Judge, that's correct. I'd be happy to.
So I'm going to go ahead and nominate Billy and get this weight off my shoulders. Before we get a second, are there other nominations? Can we get a second on the nomination for Billy?
I'll second that, Your Honor. William Appleton.
Thank you, William. Anyone opposed? It's the easiest way to do it. And Billy is elected as the chair of the council by unanimous consent. Now, with respect to a vice chair, I don't want to be the one who's throwing all the nominations out. I know that Mark may have expressed a willingness to do it. Does anyone have a nomination for vice chair? Stop it, Mick. So hearing no other nomination for vice chair, I nominate Mark. Mark, will you accept the nomination as vice chair?
Yes, Judge.
All right, can we get a second? Anyone?
I'll second it.
Okay, Billy seconds it. Anyone opposed? And Mark is elected vice chair by unanimous consent. I'll go ahead and finish the meeting out today. If you guys are okay with that. And then the next one can be your show, Billy, unless you want to take over.
No, please go ahead. I assume you'll still be joining
Okay.
us at future meetings, is that correct?
What's that?
I assume you'll still be joining us at future meetings, is that
Oh, yeah,
correct?
yeah. I mean, Mike, look, I just, as I think I said last time, I've got a little bit of an issue with the judge being the chair of the Cjcc, because I'm supposed to be impartial, and I feel like chairing the body that is in theory directing criminal justice policy or priorities for the county makes me look something other than that. Makes me look like I've got predetermined outcomes, and I'm just not comfortable with it. So, but I'm happy to participate and share my thoughts. So before I'm going to kind of take things a little bit out of order again. We do need to talk about our meeting schedule going forward. And we've got on the second page of the agenda, we're not going to get to everything today because we actually have had a lot of really useful discussion and received some good information from people. But we've got change targets on as the next agenda item, and I've talked about that before. I just want to talk about it a little bit again. One of the roles of this body is to really solve problems. I mean, we're here to essentially coordinate systemic responses to justice system problems. And in order to do that, we need to identify goals. We need to identify problems that we want to solve, and we need to identify goals. Those goals should be things that are attainable, and they should be things that are measurable. So I've had Abby circulate prior to today's meeting, and I think prior to the last meeting, a list of change targets that are being worked on in other counties, or at least were before the pandemic. Not necessarily for us to pick from the list, but for us to have examples and maybe pick from the list. But, you know, this could be as simple as, you know, reduce by X% the number of first-time marijuana offenders that are processed through the criminal justice system. It could be, you know, reduced by X% the number of people who are being held pre-trial on cash bail through creation of a bail monitoring program or other initiative that would keep people showing up for court and not violating their conditions of release. You know, and I'm just throwing out ideas. I'm not saying these are good ideas or bad ideas. I'm just throwing out ideas. And again, things that need to be achievable, solve a problem that we have, and measurable. So we can look at it and we can say, getting back to the data piece, this is the way things look for us right now. And this is what our goal is. And at the end of the day, we can say we achieved it. And this is the outcome that it made for our criminal justice system. I'm hoping that when we reconvene, obviously we're going to get our reports from our justice stakeholders, et cetera. But when we reconvene, we can actually roll up our sleeves and talk about what the justice problems we have are, what we think they are, and what kind of measurable changes we want to make to solve those problems. We've only got a few minutes left. We need to pick a date for our next hearing. Before we do that, or for our next meeting, does anyone else want to say anything about the change targets? And there's also a couple. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that as I was reading this list, a lot of these are very, very vague. So I like what you said about making them a little more specific and measurable by putting a percentage or some timeframes, things like that in the mix.
Sure. And, again, these are things they're doing other places. These don't have to be things that we do. We can come up with things of our own. So, again, there were a couple other agenda items we didn't get to today, so hopefully we can carry those over. I'm not sure that we ever actually approved the new bylaws last time we met, so we probably need to make sure we get that on the agenda. And let's look at a date for our next meeting.
This is Elizabeth Franick. Can I just throw it out an idea that I've been spinning through my head a lot lately?
Sure, go ahead, Liz.
Kind of a jail volunteer mentorship program, even, somebody that's semi-retired that wants to give back to the community, that would go through a training process, or a college internship where they would go through a training process, the grant program, to just go to the jails and visit with inmates, get some information about what could help them not reoffend, where their big issues are. And, it's just something that I've been thinking about, that, just something that we can pinpoint different areas that we're missing. I don't know if it makes sense to anybody, or if anybody can spin this around and put this on a future agenda, if anybody can build on this, but it's just something I've been thinking about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Abby, what do you have for our next meeting date? Is it September?
Yes, it'd be the first Thursday in September.
So we bumped it back a week this month because of the holiday?
Yes.
So I've got us for September 2nd at noon for the next CJCC meeting. And that'll be a Zoom meeting again. I know that we're essentially out of time here, and I know everybody's time is valuable, but before we move to adjourning, is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up or talk about today? Laura?
I just wanted to bring up, I like the two programs that you mentioned, alternatives to bail and things. But Vilas County has a recovery pod that they have partnered with the Lac de Flambeau to help continue the treatment beyond where, they have it in jail, and so it helps do the continuum. It's people that may not qualify for your two programs, but could still be helped. It'd be nice to look in a program like that and partnering up with somebody, because I know we have opioid money coming, but I don't know where exactly that'll get put.
Okay, thank you. So Abby, we need to make sure that we get into the minutes the things that Laura and Liz have talked about, and hopefully carry those over to the next agenda when we have a discussion about potential change targets. Anything else today?
I think you still have to approve the bylaws. Does that need to happen by motion?
Yeah, I think, I think actually looking at the minutes, there were a couple changes that needed to happen to the bylaws that didn't happen. So that needs to happen for the next hearing. I sent you an email a little bit ago asking you if we have them in a Word document so I can make the changes.
Sure, okay.
But, so anything else for today? And hearing nothing, motion to adjourn, anyone?
I so move. Ruth Kressel.
Second?
I'll second, Ryder.
Okay, thanks, Billy. Anyone opposed? Thanks, everyone. Like I said, I thought this was really a productive, useful session. So I'm looking forward to talking with you again in September with Billy running the show. Everybody have a good day.